Hello, and welcome to another episode of Thoroughly Thriving, where we're putting human back in human capital solutions. On today's episode, we're going to hear from an industry leader where they're sharing their thoughts, feedback, and perspective on what's happening in today's world of work. Well, let's stay tuned and perk our ears up for another exciting episode. Welcome to another episode of Thoroughly Thriving. Today, we're diving into the world of biotech, leadership, and navigating the ever-evolving pharmaceutical industry with an incredible guest, Dr. Steve Linton. Steve is a Senior Director of Project Management and Immunology at Bristol Myers Squibb. He's bringing decades of experience in drug development, project leadership, and managing high-stakes programs in both startup and big pharma environments. Steve has a PhD in chemistry from Rice University and a PMP certification. His career has spanned across medicinal chemistry, preclinical research, and late-stage project management. From his early days at Genesia Pharmaceuticals to steering critical programs at Celgene, Halozyme, Intercept, and now BMS, Steve has weathered the biotech roller coaster. Acquisitions, startups, layoffs, and breakthroughs. While his journey certainly reflects one of being resilient, he has been adaptable and has a deep expertise in moving innovative therapies from concept to the clinic. In this conversation, we'll explore the highs and lows of biotech, lessons in leadership, and what it takes to thrive in an industry where, quite frankly, change is the only constant. So, Steve, welcome to Thoroughly Thriving. We're more than excited to have you.
Wow, thanks, Darren. That was a great intro. I got to say, I'm going to bring you to my next job interview. That was awesome.
I know Darren and I talk about it, Steve, every time we record one of these. And I'm like, man, I just need you to record an introduction for me in the morning before I sit down on my computer to really get me fired up for the day. And
next time I have an argument with, I don't know, my wife or something, you're there like, well, Steve, he took out the garbage this morning. That would be great.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Well, Steve, we're glad to have you. We want to jump right in because we want to make sure, obviously, our audience is ready for some incredible content today. And as Darren mentioned in his introduction, there really is a biotech roller coaster. We've seen it even over the last couple of years, through, even its own unique iterations, right? There's different variables that are involved in each season. And, so you've been through a variety of things from startup to acquisition to, transitioning into big pharma and, what that looks like for a small company. But as Darren mentioned, there's some key things that I think really are hallmark aspects of who you are and really talking about resilience and adaptability. Can you tell us maybe a little bit about some of the biggest lessons you've learned about resilience and adaptability in such a dynamic industry?
Yeah, definitely. And I would say it comes down to not just the experiences you've had when you're trying to look for that new job and you're trying to roll with the changes, but to really try to center in on what are my skill sets, right? So I'll hit that for a moment. Like, for example, for my more recent position when I went to Celgene, before it was acquired by BMS, they needed someone for late stage project management. Hadn't done late stage, right? I had done some phase 1, phase 2 things. Darren had mentioned, I've helped submit INDs and getting first in humans started, but not a phase 3 study, not an NDA filing. And I interviewed, told him what I knew, and it was great. I got the job, but I did go to him afterward. It was like, hey, did you guys look at my resume? I don't really have that on my resume. Luckily, I said that after I got the job. I didn't say that before. And so they told me it was your PM experience and skill set you developed. And so, okay, good. I was doing the right thing because so many things are transferable because I really don't like when I see a job ad that says PM position looking for specifics in oncology or oncology experience. No, a good PM in pharma can be plugged into a different stage of development, a different indication, and figure it out because we're about the how, not the what, the how. And I like to tell new PMs that You got to sometimes be comfortable feeling a little bit stupid, right? You're not the SME. You've got to guide the team to understand, what's the goal we're hitting, what are the objectives we need to get, what's the deliverable, and you learn the what from the HMEs. But I take them through the how. How do we get that? So it's your skill set. So that's one. Another one is the importance of networking, the importance of meeting people outside of your company, right? You've got to get those relationships at other companies and other people before you need them. Like, you don't want to wait until you've been laid off or you're about to on a job, but hey, I'm going to do a network. No, you got to cultivate. I use that word specifically. Cultivate those relationships all along the way. So when you need them, they're there, and you've got those to help other people. It's not just about me. We're a community. And then finally, I've found it's important to find, someone with an experience within your network that you trust to be a mentor. Because, like, growing up, our parents are our mentors, but parents aren't in this industry. Probably they're not. And so you've got to find someone that you trust and has that experience for you to tap into to bounce ideas off of. Because if you're about to look for another job, don't know how many people would go to their current supervisor and go, "Hey, I'm about to start looking. Could you?" No, right? That doesn't always work so good. Sometimes it's possible. I've seen wonderful cases where supervisors, well, okay, let's just stop that line of conversation. But I would say those are things that have helped me get through it because I've been laid off 4 times. And it's funny, you'd think I'd get a little more used to it. I have more confidence in it, but those icy fingers in your gut when you hear those words, it's cold every time.
Yes, it is. No matter if it's been one time or 4 times, I hear you on that. Look, throughout your career, you've been exposed to different leadership styles. Um, you've been in leadership. You've by nature of what you do in program management, have to really be adept of working cross functionally. But can you tell us, around across the different functions that you've operated in, from early stage to perhaps commercialization? You talked about working an NDA study. What's your approach, Steve, to building and managing high performing cross functional teams? And then, more importantly, how do you align a shared vision? How do you get people to subscribe and engage to a shared vision?
Sure. So I've definitely learned over time that, um, hold on a second. The sun's in my eyes. I kind of got thrown off, guys. No, communication is at the foundation of every high performing team, right? Trust is at the foundation of every high performing team. Is it okay if I close the blinds here for a sec?
Yep.
Sorry, I thought I had those closed, but I didn't. So there you go. All right. Because I think you can have the smartest people in the world, and you're all in the same room. But when you start getting into those hard discussions, egos will start flaring. People will wonder if you have motives, and you won't be able to really push hard back and forth to get there, to get to that out of the box, to like have your face pressed on the glass to make that really that extra level high performing team act right. But if you start early and you develop a relationship with your team members and make sure they're talking to each other, you form trust such that when you get into these tough meetings, you start having those things. You know, I don't want to say voices will get raised, but passions will flare. But people don't take it personal. They know that you're passionate about the project, not about your ego. And I've definitely been on teams where you did not have trust and those you did. And it's palpable, the difference in those teams. And I would definitely take any day a team where there's a solid foundation of trust and not necessarily the sharpest tools in the, well, that didn't sound good. You know what I mean? Not the top A players, because the top SMEs, the smartest people, I would want people that can be team players that learn how to trust each other. If I got that, I can work with that. And once you've got that, it's all about defining the goal that we all have a shared vision, like you're saying, right? And how you get that is you put it on the table. Like, what's our purpose? What's our remit, right, of this team? And I've definitely found it important to crisply write down the goal because from one function, they may think the goal is this thing from their function's perspective, and another department may think something else. But you got to write it down. I was on a program where we were needing to announce lifting of a supply constraint. such that, so when patients filled a prescription, they would get it. So we had to control what that is. And at first we thought the goal was, one thing, I'm not going to sink too much of the details, but some folks thought it was to report it so we can talk about it in these upcoming meetings. But it was actually no, it was to get that communication to FDA such that it's there, then we can go. So we really had to line on what is it we're driving toward. And at the beginning, you've just got to, make that commitment to defining that. And once you've got that, that's where, as I mentioned before, that skill set of defining it, making sure everybody in the team knows their role and responsibility, that's huge. Because sometimes it may be blurry, even though it's obvious regulatory does this, clinical does that. I've been in situations where it's not crystal clear, even in those areas. So you've got to be clear on who's in charge of what. If you've got that, you've got trust in your team, you know where you're headed, you're crisp on your deliverable and the timeline, the due dates. You'll put together a timeline together as a team. Yeah, if I'm going on too long, let me know. But you can't just assume you've got one timeline and it's due on this date. Now, you got to work to the details. How long does it take to get to that,
Sure.
to get to that? And I tell other PMs, you will never have a case where you sit down, develop a timeline in 1 or 2 meetings and you're done. Forget it. You got to keep going back, iteration, ask them different questions, different considerations, interdependencies. It could take, a bunch of meetings to get a timeline really nailed down to be successful. So PMs or people in general should not think just because I didn't get it the first time, I'm not very good. No.
Yeah, no, I think it's great, Steve. I love your insight around, the idea of kind of preliminarily, setting up the foundation of what you need, both what you mentioned in the previous answer around, getting to know a network long before you need them and cultivating those relationships. And I think, from the period of time that we've known you, I think, yeah, I don't know many people better at cultivating relationship. And I think, many PMs that I've known, I think often forget that that's a big part of being a strong PM and leading a great project is cultivating and developing a lot of those relationships, those nuances, clear communication, clear expectation. And to your point, it doesn't just happen once, it's not one iteration and we're done. Wouldn't that be nice? Would that make things a lot simpler? But it's an ongoing process. And I think that's really what's led you to a lot of great successes. Speaking of a lot of those great successes, what if you think back on your career, working across a variety of different organization types, what's one of the most challenging projects you've worked on, and what do you think were the key factors that led to the success of that project?
So I can definitely tell you that one. It was putting together an SNDA filing for Zeposia for ulcerative colitis. And there's going to be some themes running through my answers. Okay. Because some of the things I've spoken of, were necessary to get that done. So I tell you what, it was, we were preparing for last patient, last visit in the clinical study we were doing, right? We had already kicked off the submission team. So let me back up a step. In an SNDA filing, that's where you've got a small molecule where there's already been another first submission with that molecule in a certain indication, and you filed all your CMC paperwork and all that. So this one, it's got a shorter review time and it's a less onerous submission package. So without the CMC part, but you still got to get that last bit of clinical data in.
Sure.
So leading up to that date in March, we had already kicked off, but we hadn't started really deep yet. But I did make sure we had a face-to-face meeting with our colleagues in New Jersey. And we were building that. And then our last patient, last visit, which would trigger database lock and working out the data, I'm telling you this detail for a reason, was going to be March of 2020. End of March 2020. Hello. Hey now. Okay. So we're heading to that. And all of a sudden we're realizing, we got to work from home now. And I purchased some monitors on my own, like early part of the week that the curtain came down on the 12th, I guess it was. So I was getting ready. And I even told the IT guy, hey, we got a lot of computer docs around here. Nobody's in a lot of these cubicles. You mind if I check one out for a while? They're like, sure, no problem. I'm like, thank you. Got that sucker on. So I was ready to rock when the curtain came down. But it was challenging because we had to redo our ways of working, right?
Wow. Yeah.
We were not in meeting rooms. MS Teams, it wasn't there yet. It was kind of So it was conference calls where you can't hear anything. But I'll give BMS credit. They, let's see, I mentioned Celgene. There were a lot of heritage Celgene people on this BMS thing, so we make that distinction. It was a Celgene asset that had already been acquired by folks. So us heritage Celgene people did it. Sorry for the detail, but don't want to confuse the audience. So we had to work out new ways of working. How do we do that? Working from home. How do we get different documents signed? And oh gosh, I get some time here. There was one interesting story where to complete a database lock, there had to be use of an e-signature by some certain folks on the team to get this to happen. And they were used to being in the office and using the fax machine there or whatever, the printer there, right? The printer's what they needed. Guy didn't have a printer at home. He was the main guy that needed this. So he had to figure out a way of going to a neighbor's house in the beginning of the pandemic. Everybody's wearing masks. They're like freaking out. I mean, it was hard, right? Because it was fear. See, here's the thing. It wasn't only the team's anxiousness of something, a big milestone we had to hit this submission. BMS acquired Celgene. One of the assets they acquired it for was for this asset, Symposium. All eyes are on us. They're checking on this all the time. So there's pressure to start with. Now let's throw in, death waiting at your door. So the team's a little nervous about that. You got employees with kids. They're doing daycare at home. They're not in school. It's hard for them to do their job. Oh, this was rough. And so the way we got through it, I made sure I had one-on-ones with as many team members as I could just to talk to them, to hear them out, just to keep that bond of trust going, right? Kind of the networking within your team. But it's not really networking. It was just maintaining that relationship, being a listener. That's what a good PM does. They're also kind of the counselor of the group. So you're leading, but you've got to listen. So anyway, we worked through those things, and we just found a way to get it done. I could, if I got time, I could tell another
Yeah,
story about that. Okay.
please.
So there were different members of my team that were very important to delivering this. But as I'd mentioned, you're going to have some strong personalities with very, great SMEs, intelligent folks. They have a little bit of ego on them. Of course, I don't have an ego. Yeah, right. But anyway, why do I need one? Darren does it for me. So anyway, so I could tell early on that these two people were going to bump heads. I could just smell it coming, right? And so I thought about it. I went, you know what? I like to follow the theory of if I'm hugging you, you can't hit me. Okay. So I convinced them both separately, and then I got them together. Why don't we do a one-on-one with the three of us weekly to talk through things? And so when I got them in the same room, they could hear more and listen more. They got to know each other better, the relationship, and they had more time to really put it back and forth and talk outside of a team meeting. Because when there's more people in the room, you hold yourself differently sometimes until you've got the
True.
trust. So now we're forming the trust. These guys got to know each other, and the ego stuff went away, and it worked. And I think that was foundational. I'd love to tell you more details, but I can't betray confidences. Let's just say it worked well. And to this day, one of those two parties, I'm sure both think this, but one of them definitely came back to told me like a year ago, wow, when you first wanted to do this, Steve, I thought it was going to explode on us, and I wasn't sure I was going to go. But that was one of the best things I was ever part of, because we took that risk, right? That we weren't sure how we were trusting each other, and it worked.
Wow. Amazing.
Wow. 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 Thank you for sharing,
Sure,
Steve.
no problem.
Let's talk about the future of biotech and drug development. Um, we're asked about this often, just given our vantage point. We've worked with across our career thousands of companies, and so we have the good fortune of having a pretty comprehensive vantage point. 30,000 foot view, and then we do have the ability to zoom down, being focused on human capital solution side. But with the biotech industry evolving rapidly, new modalities, regulatory landscapes. We've seen a lot of AI driven innovations. Steve, what trends do you see happening as the drug development landscapes really starts to kind of congeal? And how should, with these new things like AI, and how should industry leaders prepare for what's ahead, Steve?
Yeah, that's a hard one because in your day-to-day work, because of this environment, or not solely the innovation environment, but the tough economic environment that pharma is in right now, where budgets are really tight, and there's been layoffs, and they expect more from you. Like, somebody leaves, but they don't backfill, so you get more projects. It's tough to make time to stay up on reading and all those things. And so that's another place where networking is great, right? The more you get out there and talk to people, you're going to hear about some of these innovations and things just from those network folks you're meeting in a networking thing. Getting out, I don't want to say to conferences, but there's meetings in San Diego, like with the San Diego Venture Group, I think it is. Other groups like that, I think you could go and get some exposure. But at the end of the day, you do have to take some time to follow Fierce Biotech and things like that, just to follow those. If you're not exposed to them within what you're doing in your day-to-day work. I was grinning before because I'm on a pretty innovative, it's going to be an exciting program at my current company, but I can't talk about it because it's not on our website yet. And there you go. Oh gosh, I really want to talk about it, but it'll be out soon enough. So anyway, that's a hard question to answer because I think seeing hearing about some of those things from VCs and stuff, I don't swim in those waters. But if you try to do your best to keep up with some reading of like the trades and some of the releases that come out about new innovations, do that. But the first thing I thought of though was keep networking, talking to people. You'll hear about some things from those people because you'll hear it straight from the horse's mouth, right? Or you can ask folks, hey, have you heard about this? The other one that I find really interesting is everything around AI. I think I learned about a lot of it last year and I started understanding how it's useful, but I've not really put, I want to say pen to paper, fingers to keys using Copilot stuff until this past week, where I really started trying to use it because BMS has a lot of tools and ways of teaching us how to use it. And wow, there are some things there that will save us so much time such that we can be do innovative thinking and not doing other things. Like one thing I did today, I got an email chain. There's like all this stuff in it. And I was like, wait a minute, I just got added this. What's going on here? And you have to read through it. Or you can take that, paste it into GPT chat of your choice, say, summarize this email. Did it? Boom, summarized it. That saved some heartache and some time. Was it a lot? No. Now, people might say, oh, it's making you lazy. You're going to lose your ability to summarize. Nah, I think at a certain point in your life, you've been doing a lot of that. Younger kids, I don't know, but this is not a podcast about kids in school, so I'm not going to go there. But yeah, I think there's ways of us using in our day-to-day work, just those things, but certainly machine learning, how it's going to drive target identification, protein work, and understanding the different structures of proteins and things. That's going to open so many doors because we'll be able to get so much work to generate data so much faster, getting us to the point of decision making, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that just take a while before we can get to interpreting and deciding, that's going to be exciting. We'll be able to move faster in those senses. But I think last year is when I learned about how we could be using AI, for example, when people write clinical protocols. Those are huge documents, right? And a lot of them are boilerplate in some sections, but it takes a person time to get one started and to factor in and group things. There's ways of using HI to set up an initial protocol. I don't think that's proprietary or anything, but
No, yeah, no, I've definitely been familiar with that. You see it across and in larger organizations, especially that have multiple programs, to be able to overlay, some of that, Steve, I think will be really effectual in shortening the distance. Because I think at the end of the day, we're really seeing some really exciting science, coming through even over the last few years, things that are just very innovative. But if we can take and shorten the distance for how long it takes for development, how long it takes for coordination, how long it takes for, patient enrollment, a lot of those sorts of things. If there's anything we can do there, speed to market while also maintaining standard for, everything that must be met, I think is really exciting. So I'm with you on that. I think it's really, really interesting.
yeah, no, I think we're there. All the things that AI as a whole are definitely going to allow us to get medicines to patients more efficiently and faster. FDA is working out and has an initiative on how to work with AI with submissions to make those more easier for the sponsor and how they can work with it so we can be more effective. Because I don't know if you guys have met folks that work for FDA. They are passionate about their jobs. They look at themselves as, the public protector. We're going to make sure we're checking all these things so we get, safe and efficacious, medicines out there. And notice the order I put that in. They say safe and efficacious. Not that it worked. Oh, and it's safe. No, safe then doesn't work. And I think, people often think, those guys could go somewhere else and make a lot more money. Yeah, they could. But people don't realize how important FDA is and the kind of culture that's there. So I think use of AI with them is going to be great. And I learned some of these things at the Biopharma PM National Conference annual conference last year in 24. And one of the speakers said something that was, I thought, really valuable. He said, don't worry, AI will not replace professionals. AI will replace professionals who do not know how to utilize AI.
Mm. Yep. Right. That's right. Embrace it.
Yeah.
Yeah. We got
Well, Sean, I have learned a ton. I've learned a ton in the time that we've had with Steve. Steve, your wisdom, your experience, and also how you really lean into the community in San Diego. You are, when I think about, there's a saying, your network is tied to your net worth, and that's not necessarily in dollar sense, but it's the fullness, it's the richness of the relationships that you have, and I know that you put a lot of credence into that. So thank you for all you're doing within the pharma biotech life science industry on a macro and micro level here in San Diego. But look, we want to thank you for being our guest. Thank you for sharing again your insights. This has been invaluable. We've thoroughly enjoyed it for sure. So we're excited for future opportunities to collaborate with you, Steve, down the road, and look forward to locking arms. But as we come to a close, if you have any questions, certainly we'll put Steve's contact information in the podcast when we release it. Uh, as I mentioned, Steve's a man about the town, so I'm sure he'll be welcoming your connections and any questions that you have. But look, we enjoyed this episode. It's been great. And look, we cannot do this if we don't work as one and win as one. So we'll see you on the next episode of Thoroughly Thriving. Have a great day. Steve, do you have anything?
No, I was going to say, I hope the audience didn't miss it. I noticed that both Darren and Sean thoroughly enjoyed this podcast.
We did. We did.
Was that on purpose? That was good. I like the way you stuck the name in.
That's on purpose. Yeah. Good call out. Good call out. Great. Well, we'll see you in the next episode.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today for another great episode of Thoroughly Thriving. If you enjoyed today's episode, please feel free to share it with those in your world. If you'd like to learn more about the Thorough Group, please go to thoroughgroup.com. And remember that we will all remain thoroughly thriving if we continue to work as one and win as one.